ho 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 everybody, Santa Moles is here to deliver upon you some savings in the world of PC gaming. My recommendations, where I delved through the muck and the mire of this Steam winter sale to find my tippiest of the top recommendations for you to play. So let's get right on to it, shall we? Up first is my favorite game of all time, Nier Automata Game of the Year Edition. In my opinion, there is no other game that I have ever played or seen that utilizes the method and unique attributes of being a video game to their fullest advantage to tell one of the best stories with one of the most engaging themes and well-executed narratives that I have ever seen. Nier Automata is my #1 favorite game of all time, and it has been so for years, and I imagine it will remain so for years to come. I hold this game in the highest of regards, and at 60% off for only $15.99, a game that was once plagued by a poor PC port, I believe, has rectified that. You may want to double check. But if you haven't had the opportunity or the inclination to play Nier Automata up to this point, I fully recommend playing it. And I believe Game of the Year Edition gives you the DLC, from what I read on the Steam page, I believe so, which largely just gives you a few extra little challenge battles for you to partake in and some DLC costumes or some cosmetic skin rewards. Many people start playing Nier Automata because 2B, the main character's butt, has more polygons than all of Ocarina of Time. You can check that. But people stay with it for the introspection and the existential crisis that this game instills upon you, the player, and I wouldn't have it any other way. Realistically speaking, do you need to hear more about Baldur's Gate this year? There's a reason it won Game of the Year and is sweeping up awards across the industry like a vacuum cleaner does dust. This game is monumental. It is massive, jam-packed with thought-out, inspired content and gripping story, wonderful use of player choice, with a D&D skeleton that is truly greater than the sum of its parts. This game deserves every accolade that it is bestowed. I love this game to death, and I haven't even gotten out of Act 1 yet, and I've played so much of this game already, and I'm going to continue to play it for hours and hours, probably hundreds of hours to come. It may not be the most insane sale of all time, but the fact that this game is already even 10% off, if you haven't played this game yet and you think there's even some aspect of it that may intrigue you, give it a try. You may be blown away and captivated even though you may go into it thinking it won't. It is 10% off for $53.99, not the biggest savings of all time here, but for the amount of content in this game, it is easily worth full price, let alone 10% off. Monster Hunter. Now listen to me, Monster Hunter, one of the most well-beloved and cherished franchises in gaming, has two massive recent titles on Steam right now, with Monster Hunter Rise and Monster Hunter World. I'm not familiar with story, so I can't really talk about it, but Rise and World are all about finding giant monsters out in whatever little zone you go and adventure into, finding some way somehow to utilize your weapons and the tools you have gathered to that point to overcome said monster, and then acquire new parts from that monster to go even further beyond to make even better weapons with new effects to keep going in that gear progression loop. It is fun, charming, and inspired, and has a gameplay loop that has captivated people for years and years. And with Monster Hunter Wild being announced for 2025, if you want to delve deep into the franchise, I would fully recommend playing both Rise and World. I haven't finished them myself, but what I have played makes me want to go back to them at some point in the future before Wild and do everything that I damn well can in those games. They are super captivating. These are the type of games that can hook you in and refuse to let you go. Monster Hunter World, the one I would recommend playing first, because it's the older one, but also some people just may prefer World over Rise for better graphics, in my opinion, because Rise was originally a Switch game that got ported to PC. World wasn't a Switch game, but you have Monster Hunter World at 67% off for $9.89, and you have the DLC Iceborne, the Master Edition, that can be bundled into a different version for $19.78 if you want the bundle, but if you just want Iceborne by itself, that is 63% off for $14.79. Rather cheap for how many hours you can pump into this game. For Monster Hunter Rise, the base game is 60% off for $15.99, whereas the bundle bundle for Rise and Sunbreak is 50% off for $29.99. Bang, bang, bang! Pull my devil trigger! Devil May Cry 5. I have heard so much about this game, and I've seen a decent little chunk of gameplay about it, and if you like doing massive melee combos, just getting engrossed in the gameplay side of things when it comes to these hack and slash style games, it's Devil May Cry. There's a reason many people look at this genre of hack and slash and immediately think of Devil May Cry, and why Devil May Cry 5 was so beloved. It is wacky, over the top, and just has fun with itself, and sometimes that is the best thing a game can be. It is 67% off for $9.89 if you want the virtual DLC included, at 67% off. For $10, that's a pretty damn good deal in my opinion. Though the game may be short from what I hear, it has insane replayability and trying to grind S ranks for the missions. So there is replayability for that, so you may not necessarily want to get off-put by how short the game is on a one-through playthrough. I mean, what can be said about Resident Evil that hasn't been said up to this point in time? Resident Evil as a franchise is on a massive sale right now, but I want to particularly highlight Resident Evil 2, as it is 75% off for only $9.99, and that also gets you Biohazard Resident Evil 2 Standard Edition. Resident Evil 2 is a remake of the original, get it, Resident Evil 2, but utilizing modern graphics and some new styles and twists to the formula, Resident Evil 2 manages to encapsulate this survival horror feel that the series is known for expertly well, in my opinion. There is a reason a lot of Resident Evil games started to pop off after Resident Evil 7, but especially after the remake of Resident Evil 2, because Resident Evil 2's remake is so well beloved. It's not exactly like the original from my understanding, the few cutscenes, but the game itself stands up on its own and provides a really engrossing experience from all that I've seen from it. If you haven't given a look yet, now would be a good chance. At 75% off at $9.99. Wake the hell up, samurai. We got a city to burn. It's Cyberpunk 2077, a game that was reviled when it first came out due to a subpar launch, subpar performance, and just underdeveloped systems, in a game that was hyped up so highly to under-deliver so badly on launch. Over the years, though, through update after update, culminating in the Phantom Liberty expansion, Cyberpunk 2077 is a game that you can get absolutely engrossed in and lost in. I find the combat to be fun, interesting, and varied with all the different builds you can elect to go down, and Night City has to be one of the best locations I have seen in an open world game. The city itself and the various regions seem to emanate this personality from every street you navigate down, whereas the jobs and gigs that you partake in can get a little bit repetitive later on in the game, but generally speaking have so many different ways to tackle them that depending upon your playstyle, you can get lost in this game and just fall in love with it like I did. The base game is 50% off for $29.99, but the Ultimate Edition, which includes the base game and the expansion Phantom Liberty, is 43% off for $51.04. This is one of the best comeback stories in gaming in my opinion, and the launch of Cyberpunk 2077 was so surprising because of CD Projekt Red and how good of a reputation they had. They managed to salvage it somewhat and turn this game from a travesty into a monumental success in my opinion. If you've been needing a game to just get lost in and be fully immersed in, Cyberpunk 2077 could be your game. Dragon Quest XI is the best game that I've never finished. For a series that has always struggled with gaining a foothold in the West, I firmly believe Dragon Quest XI is one of the best games in the entire genre of turn-based JRPGs that I've ever had the pleasure of playing, and honestly, if I ever just managed to sit down and beat the freaking thing, I guarantee you it would be easily one of my favorite games of all time. It is full of imagination, full of inspiration. It's a turn-based RPG, but the combat is so fun and engrossing with varied party members and interesting mechanics, with a world so full of magic and just old-school RPG goodness that it pulls you in and refuses to let go. Each location oozes personality and character alongside the actual characters in the game, who are all memorable and just fun to be in. The game is fun, and the imagination that goes into the definitive edition for Dragon Quest XI-S, where they added an entire pillar of the game where you essentially go to the old school pixelated top-down perspective to go through little events from the previous Dragon Quest games. And if you want to, you can play the main game in one of two ways: in the 3D render that it is currently known for, but also if you want to, and if that is your preference, you can just play it in the old school pixelated art style top-down. It gives you the opportunity to play the full game that way if that is your choosing. And the different builds in this game are so wild and fun and interesting. There's genuine replayability here, with a story that is absolutely engrossing and engaging, and a soundtrack that I fell in love with. This is a game that is so horrifically underrated in my opinion, and the game has a demo, so if you don't know if you want to play it, please, for the love of God, download the demo at least to try it out. And if there's any inkling in your mind that feels like it may love this game, play it, because this is one of those games that can sink their teeth into you and refuse to let go. A beautiful world accompanied by the Dragon Quest whimsy and fun. It is 40% off for $23.99. It is a genuinely fantastic time. Give it a look and become the Luminati. Speaking of Square Enix RPGs, Final Fantasy VII. I mean, what more needs to be said about this game? This is the game that largely brought JRPGs from Japan to the West. There's a reason this game gained a foothold and was so well beloved, and still beloved in my opinion. It aged poorly graphically, and you could even argue somewhat mechanically. But when I played it back in like 2015, 2016 or something like that, I fell in love with it. The story, the world, the characters, even the gameplay, the customization, the side content, I found it so fun and engrossing. The world of Final Fantasy VII just has this inherent pull to it, a sort of gravity that just oozes edgy coolness about it. And I'm going to replay Final Fantasy VII in the near future in anticipation for Rebirth, and while Rebirth may not be on PC yet, Final Fantasy VII, in my opinion, is an amazing game, and I fully recommend it. For 60% off for only $4.79, that is a tough deal to beat for one of the most well-beloved and best games of all time in my opinion. Culminating this little arc we have of old-school JRPGs, Chrono Trigger. This game was such a big deal back when it came out, and there's a reason this game is one of the most beloved JRPGs and RPGs and just games of all time. It was the meeting of the minds, the best in the business coming together to create a singular game called Chrono Trigger. It is a game about time travel, going to various periods in time, recruiting a party, and all the different routes and adventures you can go on with it. I haven't played it myself, I don't know the entire story myself, but I've only heard great things about it, so I just want to let you all be aware that this game is 50% off for $7.49, and for one of the most well-beloved games of all time, I feel that's a pretty damn good deal. I unabashedly love Persona 5 Royal. Persona 5 Royal is essentially Atlas wanting more money, so they made a new version of P5 back in the day, but they added a whole new semester in the game, which is roughly about 20 hours after the events of the base game, with some new events and social links, which are essentially these character relations that you can level up throughout the base game as well. Persona 5 was already one of my favorite games of all time, and then Persona 5 Royal adds one of my favorite sections of any game I've ever played to an already outstanding game, alongside a whole host and swath of gameplay adjustments to make the experience all the more fulfilling, enriching, and replayable. The dungeons are better than ever. Persona 5 Royal has gained a sense and an air around it, a distinct aesthetic that is so personalized, oozing with personality, that in my opinion is also one of the best games ever made. This game has received a lot of hype, publicity, and love, and for damn good reason in my opinion. I love this game to death. It is 50% off for $29.99, and it is a game that is so good in my opinion that it makes it hard to go back to the other Persona games because they don't have the quality of life adjustments that Persona 5 Royal brings to the table. But Persona overall is one of my favorite series of all time. time, and if you need a really good starting point to get into this beloved series, Royal is a dang good place to jump into it with. It is a long game, but it's also somehow replayable. And funnily enough, I think Persona takes the crown of being that game that is impossible to describe to someone who doesn't know what Persona is. There's an entire Conan O'Brien sketch where he reads the back of the box where you go to school, have a part-time job, make friends, which can be a monolithic task for some people. And it's so hard to describe how that is genuinely fun and interesting in this game, because it's the balance between the dungeon crawling aspects of the game with the social simulator aspects and how they balance with each other and synergize with one another to create a whole greater than any individual part of it. I fully recommend Persona 5 Royal. Outer Wilds is a game that simply passed me by, but it didn't pass by a lot of other people. The game is a mystery. You are set essentially in this solar system and you're on the clock to find a way to stop destruction. If you are familiar with Majora's Mask, how with each new loop of time, you can use the information you gained previously to your advantage to take into consideration what you can do in the next time loop, the game is very similar to that style. It is all about navigating the solar system, and each time you go through a time loop, utilizing what you learned in the past to find out what you want to do here, and slowly uncovering all the secrets this solar system has in store for you. If someone told me their favorite game of all time was Outer Wilds, I couldn't blame them in the slightest, because everything that I've seen from this game oozes originality and interest. It is 40% off for $14.99. If you have not played this game, try your best not to get spoiled, as the mystery is a massive, massive part of the ride. And if I could, I wish I could lose all of those spoilers that I've accumulated over the years so that I could go into this game fresh. I wish I could, but maybe you can. Hollow Knight is one of the games that has taken the industry by storm. There's a reason Silk Song has become one of the most anticipated games to just never get like a second update about its eventual release. It is a Metroidvania style game. What does that mean? It gives you this massive interconnected map filled with a bunch of puzzles and new and interesting enemies to fight, puzzles to explore, and locations to just lose yourself in and find all the secrets within. And for you to, over the course of the game, to accumulate different techniques and tools in your repertoire so that you can go back to certain locations, utilize those newfound tools, and uncover things you couldn't before. One of these days, I really want to just dive into Hollow Knight and lose myself, because every time I try out the game, even for 30 minutes or so, it pulls me in and refuses to let go. It is a very unique art style and aesthetic with a world that is absolutely encapsulating. And if you love Metroid or Castlevania style games and you haven't tried out Hollow Knight yet, it is 50% off for $7.49, and if you want the soundtracks as well, that's 60% off for $11.97. Just bear in mind, this is also on PC Game Pass, so if you have that, you can also just play Hollow Knight right now. What are you doing? There legit has to be a documentary at some point at how Square Enix is so freaking terrible at advertising any game that they put out that's not named Final Fantasy or Dragon Quest that's an RPG. Bravely Default 2 came out a few years ago, and while I haven't had the pleasure of playing it myself, is a return to form to that classic Final Fantasy style of RPG adventure that leans into character customization and creativity when it comes to the gameplay perspective. I'm not knowledgeable on the quality of the storytelling in Bravely Default, and I know some people have some mixed feelings in regards to 2 compared to 1, but the customization from everything that I have seen in terms of the job gameplay and actual gameplay loop is really fun and interesting. And while I can imagine this art style can be extremely off-putting to many, including myself, I can also just see a lot of people not caring and just wanting that hit of that old school Final Fantasy style. And it is 50% off for $29.99, so do your research, and if this appears to be a game that appeals to you, perhaps give it a look. The fact that Mass Effect as a trilogy, the Legendary Edition, is 90% off for only $5.99 blows my mind. This was a trilogy of sci-fi RPGs that had taken the industry by storm and absolutely captivated millions of players. It is a series I desperately want to find the time to get into. And the game was essentially remade or remastered for new visuals and some mechanics were cleaned up and modernized. A little bit of a controversial aspect for some people, but it's $5.99, and if you don't have Game Pass, which is, it's on by the way, for $6, you get 3 of the most well-beloved games of all time. It's as simple as that. And while the ending of Mass Effect 3 was a particular highlight in the games industry, not because of its quality, but because of the memes we got, because of how subpar and lacking it was, the journey and the adventure are absolutely beloved and hallowed in the games industry. There's a reason I still see memes about how beloved this franchise is. For $6, that's hard to beat. Cuphead is the stylized, side-scrolling action game that has resulted in many people absolutely smashing their keyboards and controls respectively, composed of a variety of difficult and engaging boss fights that are multi-phased with multiple mechanics. Cuphead is one of the most beloved games to come out in recent years. It won't be a game for everybody. It is a hard game, and a game you have to learn and prepare yourself to deal with its many varied challenges. But if you love a difficult experience in overcoming adversity and finding ways to overcome the odds in all these different boss fights, Cuphead can be a game that tickles your fancy like few others. It is stylized with that early cartoon aesthetic, varied and just filled to the brim with imagination. Cuphead is 30% off for $13.99, but if you also want the delicious Last Course DLC bundled in, that is 30% off for $18.89. Tales of Arise. Funnily enough, the first game I ever streamed on this channel. Yes, I stream here, by the way, shameless plug. It's an action RPG where you go about unraveling this story between 2 characters. One cursed to contain this fiery sword that no one can wield because it burns them, and the only guy who can ever wield this sword as they go off on this adventure. I haven't gotten too far into the game myself, but the combat loop is fun and interesting, and I just want to go back to this game at some point. I need to find the time to go back to this game and to play it. It was so cool. It won't be for everybody, but for 50% off for $19.99, if you like these styles of games, could be a really swell time for you. Get some Doom in ya! Doom 2016 is 80% off for $3.90 freaking 9, which is an absolute steal. This game runs on a freaking toaster oven, or at least it feels like it with how well optimized it is absolutely gorgeous, and it's Doom. High-octane demon-slaying just greatness. Weapon customization is really fun and interesting as you slaughter your way through the hordes of hell. In high, fast-paced gameplay where you rip and tear through hordes of countless demons to restore your health and ammunition. You get a chainsaw as a method to restore your ammo, and the way you heal in this game is by killing other demons. It is awesome. The soundtrack is amazing. Maybe a bit of a hot take, but I prefer Doom 2016 to Doom Eternal, but Doom Eternal is nothing to slouch at either. For 60% off for $7.99, it is a steal as well. That's for the Ancient Gods Part 2. For the Standard Edition, it is 75% off for $9.99. These games are fantastic, and I can understand why people prefer Eternal, because Eternal takes a lot of what 2016 did well and just ups it to 11. But both of these games are well made, well constructed, brilliant level design, amazing soundtracks, just from top to bottom are great experiences. And what better way to ring in Christmas and the holiday season than with a bit of Doom? One day in the distant future, Warhammer 40k Space Marine 2 will release. The 40k is probably a reference to when that game will actually come out. But in the meantime, Warhammer 40k Space Marine, if you like Doom and you love slaughtering hordes and hordes of jabronis, well, Space Marine puts you in the shoes of a Space Marine, in the Warhammer 40k universe, and tasks you with going absolutely wild on hordes of orcs. I'm not that knowledgeable, really, about the 40k universe whatsoever, but I remember that Total Biscuit video from years ago where he played Space Marine and fell in love with the combat and just fanboyed out for minutes on end as he experienced the gameplay loop and just how gory and visceral this game is. I'm definitely playing this before Space Marine 2 comes out, and if you want a game where you just go in and slaughter hordes of orcs, I mean, Space Marine is right there for 80% off for $11.99. It seems like clockwork. Every time we have one of these Steam sales, the Witcher franchise goes on a massive discount. And it is time for me to remind you all once again that in my humble opinion, The Witcher 2 and The Witcher 3 are two of the greatest RPGs ever made, full stop. And the fact that The Witcher 2 Assassins of Kings Enhanced Edition is 85% off for only $2.99, while The Witcher 3 Wild Hunt, one of the most expansive open world and enthralling games I've ever had the pleasure of playing, is 75% off for $9.99. For less than $15, you can get two of the best games ever made in my opinion. The Witcher is a series built and predicated upon the idea of preparing for your battle, interesting dialogue, and multiple routes that are affected by your own player choice and your agency in the game world. This is especially true for The Witcher 3 in my opinion. An absolutely amazing, enthralling, immersive fantasy world that is detailed, well thought out, and well put together, that'll have you thinking about this game, this story, and the Witcher, Geralt of Rivia, for years to come. It is incredible. I fully recommend these games. The Witcher 1 is apparently getting a remake. I think it absolutely needs it. I've tried to play The Witcher 1, which is 85% off for $149. It has not aged that well. Maybe you can get through it and you can have a good time with it. I'm going to wait until the remake, but I think The Witcher 2 is an excellent smaller scale version of what The Witcher 3 does, which will appeal to a lot of people, whereas The Witcher 3 may be too open for a lot of people. But for me, both of these games encapsulate what makes The Witcher so compelling. A mature world and story tackling mature themes, gift-wrapped in coolness and epic fantasy adventure. I fully recommend The Witcher. And with that, I think I will call the video there for the day. Thank you all for tuning in. My pleasure for making the video. I have a penchant for RPGs and shooters, but I try and get a little bit of multiple other genres in the mix as well. These are games that I either have played or have heard a lot about or have watched a lot about. And if any of them have piqued your interest, please leave a comment down below with which game that was and what games you plan on getting or want to get for this Steam sale. I would love to hear your thoughts and hear your opinions, because there are many other games that are on sale right now. These are just my picks of the lot. So thank you all for tuning in. I hope that helped in some way. These are always some of my favorite videos to make because I just love talking about video games, and this series gives me an excellent opportunity to just gush about a lot of games that I've either heard about or have played extensively and absolutely adore. So thank you all for tuning in. Please leave a like and subscribe. It really helps the channel out and helps support future content, and I greatly appreciate it. Stay safe, have a great day, and I'll see you all next time. Bye-bye, everybody. Until we meet again.